So I'm with AJ Alavari, who kindly joins me pretty much every week when he's not absolutely too busy. AJ is an atheist. I don't like to do long introductions, but just so people get a rough idea. But he also runs a Quran class that I'm part of, where we discuss and delve into various interesting verses of the Quran. And I said to him, us men, we don't spend time talking about our feelings and what's happening in our lives. Let's do this. Like, I was intending it to be a private one-to-one, but he was very kind and generous to make it a live stream. and and he has to be particularly generous because I do challenge him in his beliefs and things like that, but not from a place of just having difficult discussions, but from a place of love, and as hopefully you'll find out in this one as well. Okay, so what is this topic? In the title it says simp or chivalry, are you a slave to women? So if people don't know what simp is, it's basically, I would say, I would define it as simply as somebody who's a slave to women. um and chivalry, of course, well, not of course, but it's basically generosity, but maybe particularly targeted towards women. It's just by the way the word is used. So I'm going to do a bit of a monologue for about 10 minutes, go through the main ideas as fast as I can, um, and then Alavari is going to share his feelings about what I've got to say. So why am I talking about this with Alavari? And Alavari probably won't mind me saying this, right? But I have a theory that he helps a lot of women. He could be a simp. I'm not sure. I don't think he minds me saying that because he knows where I'm coming from. And maybe he doesn't. And for everybody who doesn't, actually, I think it's really harmful to be a simp. Everybody has needs to be fulfilled, right? So for example, sexual relationships with women, if you're simping, that's not a very effective way of doing it. um, and you're making your life difficult. So that's where this is coming from, and I'm happy for people to say I'm a simp, for example. It's all like interesting discussion. So for example, I'm looking for a second wife, and you might say, oh, you're a simp for sex, basically. And um, just to give a quick answer to that is, it could be true. First of all, everything could be true. There's always an element to something like that. um, but any second wife I'm looking for, I tell them, you have to be religious, you have to be this or that, otherwise it's not going anywhere. Okay, and so how do you find this dividing line? I'm going to, as a Muslim, I didn't introduce myself, I'm a Muslim. um, and so the dividing line is, who is your master? So uh, again, like I said a bit a second ago, sex is really important, it's really healthy, you should be going for it. I'm not saying that at all, that you shouldn't, right? But there's a fulfilling side, and if you do it the wrong way, there's a dark side. It's bad for you. Okay, depending on what controls you or what is your master. You might say, why would I use that strange word? What is your master? So I'm gonna give you kind of the high level view of what I'm talking about. Two verses of the Quran that I'm going to refer to. One is if you're a servant or a slave, let's say, to God, and God in this particular verse is described as the gracious. Gracious means, it's an Arabic word which loosely translated as gracious, which means super generous, not expecting anything back, right? And then there's kind of, I've paired it with this other verse, which is talking about people who are pulled in different directions and disagreeing directions. They are essentially where slaves who we don't really get to choose if we're slaves, because we're just we're always uh, subject to external forces being weak. We're not God, so we're always slaves to something, right? And so you can either be a slave to God or you can be a slave to human beings. And when you're a slave to human beings, you're pulled in many different directions, and that's where stress comes from. Like you might think, mental stress comes from essentially being pulled in different directions. And so you might say, how can being gracious or gracious, a servant to God who is gracious, therefore you must be gracious. How does that make you good at sex or anything like that, right? How can that be a positive thing? How can God be related to sex? And by the way, I should say this is a document in the description, which is part of a larger course, my happiness course I used to do, and it's about sex positions, and all those kind of things. But everything begins with connection, and everything that begins with mindset. So that's, I mean, I'm just talking about like a very short version of it, focusing on the mindset bit. Anyway, so if you're controlled by God, the most generous, who gives you so much without expectation, so you get rain, air, all these things that we forget about, to be a servant of God, you should be like God, and therefore be selfless and generous, and then you will connect, which is the essence of sex. So people think, or in this materialistic world, we think of sex just a physical thing, but rape is sex as well. But that's not. The mindset is completely different, right? Okay, so it's not, it really is in the mind. Sex is really, I would say the brain is the largest sexual organ. So, and the most important. So selfishness makes you lost in yourself. So we're very disconnected in our lives because we're very selfish, I would say, in the West at least, right? So if you take that into the bedroom, you're not really going to be connected. You're not really going to enjoy sex like it can be enjoyed. And so you have to learn to be generous, and that's being what I call show indiscriminate love, right? But most people would say this person is toxic, that person is toxic, because they don't meet all their requirements, a person's requirements. And so you have to get over that idea of people being toxic. You be kind to them. Maybe people feel that somebody is toxic because they're actually engaged in transactional love. They're depending on something from the other person that is supposedly toxic. It can be bad, right? But if you don't, like, if somebody's rude to you, but you don't expect anything bad from them, you don't feel them as toxic. It's just like, oh, you feel sorry for them, and you try to help them out. So, in answer to the question in the beginning, is it simple chivalry in your any particular case? What you have to do is, the way I would see it is, chivalry is when there's a higher cause, right? Um, and there might be willing transactions, so you might get sex out of it, right? Because, like, you're a really good spouse, for example, um, and your spouse really enjoys having sex with you. Is your one question you might want to demonstrate if you're a simp or you're indulging in civil chivalry is your love for all? Is it for everybody, or is it just for women, for example? If it's just for women, then this might suggest your love is your supposed love is transactional, right? And I'm going to give another way to demonstrate if you are a simp or not in the second verse. So this is, I should just read it, I guess. Allah sets forth a parable: a man belonging to several partners disagreeing with one another, and a man belonging wholly to one. Are the two equal in condition? All praise belongs to Allah, but most of them know not. So it's just an interesting way of putting forward people's situations, and you have to contemplate on it. Anyway, so if you are not slave to God, then you become a slave to everything else, as only God can satisfy you. All else would enslave you. And as you run in all directions, trying to be satisfied away from God, you will being end up with many masters, pulling you in opposite directions, making you miserable or stressed, as I like to try to give that kind of metaphor, like you're being pulled in different directions. So you're a slave to women, just to summarize, it's the end part. You are a slave to women if you depend on them to make you happy. When you are a slave, you are a simp. If you are stressed, that suggests you're being pulled in different directions as you have many masters, and so you are a simp. I kind of said that again. You may be chasing one woman, for example, but you will likely be chasing other needs as well. But as they are not from the one source, that it means you're not it's not for one reason, that is God, then you will feel stressed of being pulled in different directions. So just to explain, if everything you do is for the sake of God, it's all coming from one direction. So if you're kind to somebody, or a woman, let's just say, and let's say you don't get sex, you don't mind because the aim was higher. You already won. You pleased the real master, which is God. Okay. And then you don't become dependent on that as well. Like, you don't become a sex slave. People might think, for example, and people can go by their own definitions, if you're addicted to sex, then you're still in a way a simp in my reckoning, because you're a slave to women. So that's another thing. So yeah, so if you chase just God, you've got one source for all your needs and everything, then you won't have that stress. What's this last thing? And a typical example of this is chasing women is expensive, and so you will not be able to do many other things with that money. So that was the idea of, even if you're only simping for one woman, it takes your money, and then you're stressed because there's so many other things you need to do with that money that you like to do that you're not doing, like going around the world or something. Thank you very much for listening to that. Oh, that wasn't too long, 11 minutes. Um, Alavari, tell me what you feel about all of the stuff I just said.
Thanks, Khaled, for that presentation. I thought it was quite confusing, to be honest. I'm not sure if people in the audience are also feeling the same thing. I think we
Sure.
have different ways of approaching the issue. I think really we should, as I've emphasized many times before in our discussions and also in the Quran study class, I think understanding the definitions of the words we're using and building an argument progressively is very important to me. And I don't think there was a lot of things there that maybe you were responding to a collection, a cloud of related arguments that you've had here, there, and everywhere with people around this issue. And it's quite difficult to follow. So hopefully we can dig into it a bit more. Maybe it's just
Sure.
my perception of these.
Sure. Yeah,
So
no, it'd be
let's
very interesting.
yeah, let's start off with
If you have a confusion, when you go through that confusion, maybe you unconfuse other people as well. So I appreciate that.
exactly. Yeah. So let's start off with the definition. So simp, I think why it's called simp, I think it comes from the etymology of being too sympathetic or being too submissive. So it comes
Oh,
from
yeah,
that
I
word.
thought that's a good point. I thought it was because you're a simpleton or simple, basically. Yeah,
So these are good things to think about when we
yeah,
prepare and before rather than in the middle, but it's okay. We can get to it. That's why I think there is a humility and there is a discipline in approaching things with definitions and putting the argument slowly. Um, so yes, so it could be a simpleton. As far as I know, that's not being a simpleton. You know, you can be a simpleton and also be hard-headed. But I don't think that relates to it. But I think it's the idea here is that one is too sympathetic, and in the culture, especially in the online culture that we live in, simp is used in that way, as far as I know, that someone, usually a man, is too sympathetic and too submissive towards, and usually a sexual partner, or a partner that they intend to be sexual with or romantic with, but they're in a sense they're giving too much up in like vain pursuit of something. And we can see that there's people like Andrew Tate, maybe Jordan Peterson, but others who are seeing this, they're proposing this crisis of masculinity and too many kind of beta males or sympathetic, overly simp um, behavior in men, especially who are not getting, sexual gratification in pursuing that, and in the modern age and so on. I think so that's the general uh, kind of source of ideas where this idea of simp comes from. Now, from a spiritual point of view, from studying the Quran, from studying spiritual texts, from trying to, as we say, I think it's good that you mentioned unconditional love and helping others and trying to sort of be in the image or try to approach the image and the ideals of a God, for example, the God of the Muslims, being gracious, being generous. How do we reconcile these two things? Because that's also some of the confusion that I saw in the presentation there. Because if we start off by saying being a simp is a bad thing, and again, I don't think we defined simp properly, but if we say being a simp is a
can
bad
we go
thing,
by
but
my
then
definition? Because otherwise it will go into all sorts of. I like to, let's just. I've chosen a
No,
definition which is being a slave to women.
yeah,
Let's
well,
call it
that's
that. Even if you
uh,
disagree, like let's say the topic is how do you know if you're a slave to
yeah.
women?
I'm I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm coming to this. I'm coming to the slave part as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So if we're going to use simp, we have to flag that up because then someone can join the discussion and see, okay, why is simp being used in this way? But at least now it's on the record that there's this confusion about that. But I'm coming to love shortly. So um, being a slave to a woman, the same thing. If you're overly submissive, you're overly generous. I think the idea is there that you're saying that men are giving up too much of their time, their energy in being subservient or submissive to women, and that that's somehow damaging. And this idea of being a slave.
I wasn't
Well, I
putting it
would say,
exactly like that, but yeah, go on.
okay, what part of that is?
I was saying it depends on the what controls you. So that's what I said in the beginning. What is your
Mm.
master,
But if the
right?
woman is the master,
So yeah, you could have
that's
a
what I'm
woman
saying.
as your master.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
That's
yeah.
in the definition that I said. So
Okay, yeah.
if the woman is the man, so now I would say let's take a from a spiritual point of view. My first reaction is why just focus on that? I mean, coming from I benefit a lot from Buddhist teachings as well as a Quran class. I also help in a Gita class, and in those traditions, in the Hindu mystical tradition and also in the Buddhist tradition, the idea of material attachment to anything material, not just to a woman, not just to sex, not just to money, not just to charity, anything material, if you attach yourself to it and are expecting something in return, it's going to end in suffering, which I think is a very beautiful expression. So there's a much larger debate here. If we focus it narrowly on unjust women, I think we're kind of missing the wood for the trees. The same logic, the same spiritual attitude, the same spiritual posture for me applies to whether there's someone in my life that I want to care for, or to money, or to cars, or to a house. So that would be my first response here is that the materialist attachment to, say, being a simp to dunya, if we want to try and coin a phrase, or being a slave to dunya is going to be a problem, full stop. Then that has to be
Sure.
challenged. Now,
And
the
Alabari is saying the
unconditional
word dunya is an Arabic word which means the world or worldly
worldliness.
pleasures. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we've got this the quote on the screen there, the definition. Typically, someone who does not reciprocate the same feelings, but we are trying to expand this more because Khaled raised the idea of God and graciousness and charity and all these other things that we can and being a good Muslim. So yes, I think there is a way to be sympathetic, to be unconditionally loving, which we've talked about in another live stream as well. And being unconditional, I would say I'm a romantic. I'm unconditionally loving. If I'm in a, if I'm in a relationship with someone, or if I'm trying to form a connection with someone, my posture, just from my spiritual upbringing, is to be open, is to be loving, is to be unconditional. But that doesn't mean being allowing yourself to be disrespected, or of course, there's a big danger of abuse, and usually it's from men towards women, but it can be the other way around. I mean, male abusive relationships also happens from women. So these are things we have to be concerned about because if we don't, just like when we say we love God, we love. It's easy to love a perfect God that sort of is in the supernatural ether somewhere, but it's harder to love the imperfect humans that we also need to love because that's what these holy texts command us to do. We have to love one another with our imperfections, and that includes loving ourselves. And I can't love myself if I allow myself to be abused, disrespected, and downtrodden, because then I can't function as a human being. So there's no use being a slave in that sense if that means that I'm not fulfilling my own, um, giving enough respect and giving enough glory to the fact that I exist and I have an opportunity to
Yeah.
exist and contribute towards the
You're a
world.
person just like the other people you're trying to
Exactly,
show love for. So you should
exactly.
have equal rights
Mm.
in that sense,
The
not less.
last point, yeah, and the last point I want to throw into this thought pool is the idea of romantic love from a spiritual point of view, especially from a Sufi point of view. And this is where my romantic posture comes from. I mean, readers may be familiar with the story of Layla and Majnun, which is a very famous Islamic civilization story. It's originally Persian, but it's all known throughout all the Middle East and the Arab world and the Persian-speaking world as well, of this idea of these two lovers who are separated, and Majnun. Majnun literally means crazy. through their love and through their sort of hapless failing to find each other, they find each other and they're separated again by the world and by other politics and family issues. It's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet type story. So there, and that's how held up as a high watermark of kind of human existence, human subservience. And in that sense, Majnun saw in Layla a manifestation of that divine spirit. He found that in her and he found that in himself. So there is a place, I think, for being a slave to an idea or say to your wife or to your husband, but in that way, in that respectful way, with other without debasing ourselves, but just saying, listen, I'm completely submitting myself to this idea. It could be raising a family, it could be having a relationship. And in doing that, I find my humanity. But it has to lead to that humanity. It can't make you into an animal. It can't make you into a monster and a fundamentalist or an extremist or a terrorist.
Sure. So
When
would
we
you
submit
just
ourselves, it can be something
just
beautiful.
just to be clear, like say you can love your wife, for example, right? But as long as it's in line with loving God,
Yes,
because if
exactly.
you okay, sure, yep,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
otherwise you'll be
absolutely.
pulled in different directions. Cool, yeah.
And you don't want to you want to see the lust when seeing the divine in the other person. Like in Indian culture, we have namaste, we have that or sastrikal, or we have that greeting. What you're saying there on a very basic level, it's not you can have a romantic relationship with a person, but even a stranger, the divine in me acknowledges the divine in you. That's what we're saying. So
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing all of us as, again, this is a very Sufi idea, which I have a lot of time for. We're all waves in the same ocean. We're all part of the same creation. So seeing that approach, when you have that kind of a higher perspective, then of course it's no problem to be a slave to the divine, but not in a sense of idol worship. Not you're not idol worshiping your wife, you're not idol worshiping your girlfriend, you're not idol worshiping anything material, but you're just saying this life is a gift and I want to extract the most out of it. And in being a slave to an idea, if we're downtrodden our ego, that can be, I think, beautiful. It can be of a benefit. So in these ways, I can see there are some good ideas or there's some good concepts in the Simp um, debate that are a bit higher and they progress the debate a bit more than just simply what sex position or do you message her or does she message you, all of these things, because I think once we have that higher perspective, then we have the tools and the values and the framework to come down and say, okay, let's talk about messaging, let's talk about dating, let's talk about sex, or let's talk about multiple wives. But that overall perspective helps me because it gives me a direction of where I'm going to make sure that I don't miss that. Whether I'm a simp or I'm not a simp, I don't want to lose that overall direction and the values that matter to me.
Oh, okay. All right. So I want to always make it practical and personal to you, but without obviously be like as you have on YouTube, this sort of aggressive, antagonistic thing. But so more like a contemplative thing. So would you say a high percentage of the people you're helping, you do a lot of help with in your charities, are they women?
It's difficult to say. Yeah, I suppose so. A lot of what I help, the direct help that I give, interpersonal help, practical support, coaching, mentoring, moral support is with refugees and asylum seekers, and the majority of those tend to be women and children and so on. So, yeah, by that measure, yes, I would say so. And in my charities, but then also the individual help that I give, yeah, I would say I'm helping maybe at the moment four or maybe five people individually, and three of them are women or young girls. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And of course, as I said, this is not supposed to be just antagonistic, but contemplative. So it could be possible. Like if anybody says I'm doing something that could be harmful to myself, we'd be like, oh, okay, that might be true. Let's tease that apart. Let's see if there's any truth in it for my own benefit, right? To know myself better. So do you think there could be any possibility or that you might be simping because any simp doesn't want to be called a simp or agree that they're a simp, right? And we're all simp. I would say, if I was going by the simpleton sort of idea, that we're controlled by our feelings and egos and things like that, and it's better if we can overcome that. We can see a higher perspective that will make our lives better. So that's where I'm coming from. So, what do you think about that? Is there a possibility you could be simping and spending huge amounts of your time rather than making more progress in a direction that you might be better off in?
I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I think I make an intentional choice to help people in need because, unfortunately, my government and the local authorities here aren't well equipped to help refugees or asylum seekers in their personal lives, practical support, moral support. They find it difficult to book doctor's appointments or to get other kind of, legal help and advice, things like this. So I see it as my duty, as someone with spare time and resources and ability to contribute to play my part. Am I, could I be using that time differently? Yes. For example, I could, use that time to earn a second or third or fourth, side income. Sure. But that's the choice that I've made to not do that because I think based on my humanistic spiritual values, I want to help people if I can, rather than think of my own material progress in that sense. So, as I said, I'm a simp in this romantic Sufi, seeing all creation as one, trying to naught my ego, which I agree. I definitely say in that simplistic sense, I'm also definitely a simp to my ego and my desires. I mean, that's something that I try and control, been trying to for many years. It'll be a lifelong battle when, I have the desire to take the easy path in many um, decisions I have in my life because the ego and the desires, the laziness, the complacency, the self-justification, those voices are always there in my mind. I've not learned to control those yet. But I have a choice. I do have a choice to overcome them. So, for example, there is a voice that says, "No, it's fine. Don't go and travel 2 hours to meet that asylum seeker. It's fine. Let someone else do it, or just have a call with them." But then I think, no, actually, having a call with them is a bit, if I have a choice, I want to go and see them in person because that makes that person feel respected and feel loved and feel cared for when the government, the institutions, everything else has abandoned them. They have no family, either because maybe they've left their religion or they're politically persecuted. And bringing that joy into someone's life is, I think, at the core of any religious or spiritual service. So I make a choice to do that. So that's how I would approach my simp relationship to how I spend my time and helping people. That's the context.
Yeah, thank you very much for calmly dealing with that accusation, right? You can call it accusation or something to contemplate on, right? And I don't know. I don't claim to know, right? I just look at something and go, oh, that could be Alavari, AJ, my brother, could be, I think he should be getting married, and I think he could possibly be using up his energy in with women that might not be the best direction to get that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't understand I thought you meant like side income, second, third, fourth. Yeah,
Okay, no,
I could talk about that
oh,
as
yeah.
well if you want. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we could talk about that as well. I suppose the thing I was gonna, yeah, so let's talk about
Mm.
that as well then. So,
Yeah. So yeah,
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
married. Yes, I've never been married, and it's like with anything else in my life. I think I don't try and whether it's money or whether it's status or position. I don't try and run from it. I don't try and run towards it. Now, I've tried to be an activist, a community organizer, but I've actually ended up being uh, nominated and elected to last year the board of directors of a global charity, and that's very bureaucratic. But I don't. I just sort of I go with the flow. This is what happens. People ask me to do it, and like I'm going to Singapore next month for a global conference, and I think is that something that I planned? No, I didn't. So just like in that part of my life, in my romantic personal part of my life, I don't run from. I don't purposely avoid. Intimate relations or becoming close with someone or marriage. And I don't run towards it because I think again, maybe it's my privilege. I don't live in a society where I need to get married to have a stable life, for example, or I need to have kids to look after me. Um, so far, I mean, that could definitely change. So it's not been a high priority for me to walk towards that. But I'm happy to say that in spending in the work that I do, I meet many lovely people, both the people that I'm helping and also other colleagues, because whether it's martial arts, whether it's my uh, career and office work, whether it's my charity work, when you commit yourself to something and you spend time and energy and you make yourself open to possibilities, you meet all kinds of lovely people, wonderful people. I live in London, again, very privileged to do so. So there's all kinds of opportunities around me to meet people, and it hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure that God willing, this will. I'm open for whatever. Again, I don't want to be too attached to the material attachment of marriage, of that status, of being, having a life partner. I think the ego and the desire and sexual relations, all of that, the ego and the desire can also play a part there. But I'm open to whatever may come my way. And if nothing comes, then I also, as a good spiritual seeker, I have to accept that rather than trying to have my own plan, rather than perhaps God's plan, as it were.
Sure. Yeah, so just to touch on like the need for getting married. So in Islam and a lot of the monotheistic teachings, the original monotheistic teachings, let's say the Orthodox, let's say, um, they always push their followers to get married, and I think it's not some random ritual. Um, it's really dangerous. You can look at it from a, what's it called, an evolutionary point of view. Why is there so much sexual pleasure? Pleasure is uh, a way of telling you, uh, or nature telling you what you should be doing. It's kind of like I don't know how, what's the word, like it's a motivator. Let's call it a motivator, right? Nature saying you should reproduce and things like that, and we find when we are in line with nature, it's really healthy for us. And why would it be healthy for us? There's the oxytocin, there's the unusual connection, deep connection, which you don't get with friends. As I say, blood is thicker than water. You know, when you get older, you expect your children to take care of you when you're 80, maybe 90 and frail, but you can't expect the same thing for friends, especially if your friends are going to be your age and they can't do the same for you. So I really do in my marriage classes, etc., try to warn younger people before it's too late, that they really should get married. It's really healthy, it's really important. And if you don't, and this might sound really crazy, but people are quite unaware of this, like people, for example, in America and a lot of Western societies, pedophilia is rising really quickly. And that is, I would say, because of when you're not in stable sexual relationships, and we need to have sex, evolution has made us want it, then we start going to porn, and porn, the nature of it, or the nature of our needs, is that when we're not fulfilled by porn, and we're not fulfilled by many other materialistic things, we chase more and more extreme versions of porn until it gets to pedophilia. And that's my theory, is why pedophilia is rising rapidly in the West. And there's the examples of Buddhist monks and priests who commit to not having sex. And there's a lot of examples of both of those people, both of those categories. People don't realize, for example, Buddhist monks are indulgent in pedophilia, but if you do search on the internet, you'll find out that it's true, and it's quite natural and to be expected. So I always tell young people, younger than myself, like AJ, don't kid yourself. You do need to get married. So I suppose you can respond to a bit of that quickly, and then I'll move on to a bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I don't mean to say that the path that I've chosen, well, I say chosen, but it's not like I've been avoiding getting married, maybe not pursuing it or hunting it as a top priority, because I don't think it is a top priority for me. I don't think that's the That's the path that everyone should pursue. And again, it's not for me to tell people what is their priority and isn't their priority. But I agree, evolutionarily, um, how being in human pair bonding, long-term bonding is in our genes, it's in our genetics. And that's going to, so I think we've talked about this before, like why the population decrease and the crisis in marriage, I think was one of our first topics. My belief is if we create the conditions for people to, so for example, the refugees that I'm helping, all of them are either in married or they're in relationships. And actually some of them are refugees have met themselves while they're escaping. So one person I'm helping now, she's young in her early 20s, Iranian, and she met a uh, Kurdish fellow asylum seeker when they were both fleeing their persecution families and communities because of religious abuse, and they met and they fell in love. So I think, and that was in a nightmare of a scenario, like detention centers and prisons and being deported in such a harrowing circumstance. They found love. So love is going to happen in some sense. I don't want to be complacent about it, but when we create the conditions for a stable, a secure society, people are going to find each other and have babies and build long-term communities kind of automatically because that's in our genes. The problem is, for example, in the UK, we've had 15 years of austerity where people in my generation can't have a secure roof over their heads. They can't even afford an out-of-pocket unexpected. There was a study done in London a few months ago, published in the Evening Standard, one of the main Metro newspapers here, freedom newspapers that everyone in London has access to and reads. I think maybe something like 60% of the population of London can't afford something like £100 unexpected bill that just came up because they're living so hand to mouth. They can't do that. When that's the amount of stress that you're under, right? And maybe you're living with family, you're living with parents, and in many cultures that's not conducive to um, romance and sexual experimentation and finding new people and all of that. In some cultures it is, in some it isn't. But with all of those pressures, is it any surprise that people are turning to, again, online gratification, virtual sex, and all of this kind of thing? And also, yeah, like sexual abuse and pedophilia. If those are problems, then I would trace it first to this as a root problem because, go back to the basics. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People need, if people are feeling sheltered, fed, watered, their health needs taken care of, education taken care of, then naturally they're going to have families. That's, I think, the problem, at least in the UK. Different countries have different problems because you have large family sizes often when it's poverty, so because people need to have more kids in order to make sure some of them survive. So it's a multifactorial thing. And so I'm not suggesting that everyone should do. And even if I wanted to, even if I wanted to start a church of AJ or a cult or an ashram, it's not going to happen because I'm going to be, as you say, swimming against the tide of um, sort of natural human instinct. And not everyone is charitable or wants to spend their time doing charity work. It's going to be the minority. Just like not everyone is spiritual. The holy texts tell us this. Most people just want to work, come to the end of the week, relax, put their feet up, and so that's what, and be with their family. That's more of a common need than my slightly strange need to go out of my way to help people and to sacrifice my own potentially family building time to build relationships and support other people. But that's fine. We need an ecology of different interests. Like we talked about before, a rainforest survives because there's an ecology of different plants and survival strategies. Not every plant can be a tree. Some plants have to be small, some plants have to be big, some insects have to work in different ways. So all of these intermesh together to make a lovely ecosystem. And the same thing with human beings. So I think that's where I'm working at, giving refugees, asylum seekers, vulnerable people, but also people generally. A quarter of the UK's children live in poverty. We fix
Hmm.
that, marriage, children, communities will fix themselves, I think. That's not going to be a
Sure.
problem.
So I
But
would say
we have
that
a
it
problem.
doesn't statistically fix itself. Within a given society, within that same society, it is if you're religious, you're far more likely to get into marriage and have children because it's about priority. So how high you put it up in your ranking of what you must do, and if you see it as a societal need, better for society that you do it, um,
But we
because
just discussed it's an evolutionary need. We just discussed there is something. Okay, we're not automatons. We're not completely just a slave to what
so
the
you yeah I
neuronal
know
programming is. But
that
we
is
have
a
that need.
funny. We have that
Mm,
need, that's right. But despite the huge need that God has put in us so that we do the right thing, we make our lives miserable. So we have a social need, for example, to be connected with other people. Yet we
mm.
somehow in richer societies close ourselves off because
Or
there are
somehow, yeah, it's not some.
a
It's
lot.
not some kind of mysterious.
One of the
We
biggest
can see
killers
why.
in London and in the
Yeah,
UK is loneliness,
loneliness.
despite
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
And
So
let's look at
we
what's
we
happened
we
over the past 20 years. Let's look at what's happened in terms of people's leisure time, people's
sure.
disposable income, people's libraries,
So my
swimming
point
pools,
is that you've
youth
already said
centers being
that.
closed down.
Sure, you've already,
Yeah.
that's a good point,
Which is
Ozja.
very important. It's not some kind
Yes,
of
that's
mystical kind
true.
of, COVID. Where did it come from? Some kind of virus that came out of
Sure.
nowhere. It's very purposeful. It's been
Yeah,
built
sure.
year
Now
by
I
year.
agree that
We've worked at this loneliness society.
sure. I agree that that is a problem, but also there is, I find from the different societies I've looked into, including in Jordan, is the people who have less money, the poorer people who seem to have more children, right? And that's not to say
As I
that
said,
they're
yeah,
also, oh,
because they're
yeah,
precarious, because they live in precarious. The correlation seems to be if you're not sure whether your children will survive, and if you're not sure whether the state will take care of you or the community will take care of you, you tend to have more kids. And also, if your women are not as educated.
yeah, that's a whole different interesting discussion. But yeah, if I hopefully we might be talking about capitalism next time because that was one of the options that and we will talk about is capitalism good and bad and stuff like that as well. That's an interesting discussion. So one thing, so I want to say briefly, as my brother, I do say recommend that putting what your priorities are what happens in life. So I would recommend getting married, put it higher up in your priorities, very important. um, but to move on to another question, just one more question about like to help you contemplate, and maybe you thought about this already. um, since you do seem to be supporting out of the asylum seekers mostly women, and I don't know the exact numbers in terms of asylum seekers, but I do know that, especially those coming off literally off the boats, the dinghies and stuff like that, and really dangerous situations, they are all men, as far as I understand, or pretty much young men or children because it's so dangerous. Um, I mean, I suppose my question is, in terms of asylum seekers, you might know this better than me, but are they mostly men?
Um, I don't think so. I think they were um, the ones coming across the like on the boats in the dinghy. Maybe they are more men, yes, but I'll have to check. I can't think off the top of my head. Um,
Okay, so it's just I'm just
yeah.
questioning, like, if you've got a lot of men asylum seekers, and they could probably do with some moral support as well. Just the last question on this because I don't want to labour the point, and we finished most of the discussion
Mm.
anyway. Um, do you think you could be better supporting the possibly larger majority of male asylum seekers?
Sorry, say that again.
So
Could I
So
spend
my,
less
my
time?
point here is that
Okay.
if
Mm,
they're
mm,
okay, potentially,
mm.
according to, because I know like the people who come on the dinghies
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's so
I think we can
dangerous.
safely assume that they are mostly young men. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, let's just say there are mostly male asylum seekers because it's so
Mm,
difficult,
mm,
such a difficult thing to do.
yeah,
Wouldn't
yeah.
it be a kinder thing to do in terms of generosity,
Mm,
to be helping men? And I'm not just trying to be difficult because this is a question of really questioning ourselves, what are our motives? And I do want to say again, the stuff you do, I don't know your motives, right? But I'm going to assume your motives are fantastic and it's really kind and all the stuff you're doing. But as your brother is potentially that you could your motives could be skewed, and for your own benefit, try question this thing like, am I helping women even though there could be a smaller minority in terms of um, asylum seekers where I should be possibly helping men? So maybe I can put the question like this: do you think you could be better off helping men, male asylum seekers?
I'm not sure how to answer that question because I don't see it in those terms. Our charity, both on the local level in West London, in Hounslow, where I live, and also in nationally as well. On both scales, I know active in refugee support and asylum seeker support. We triage people who come to us, and we don't go to the asylum seeker hotels or detention centers and pick out women and help them. We just say, we're here, we're a charity, we'll come to you. There's a few hundred people staying in a hotel, quite near me, several hotels actually, because I live quite near the airport. And we just say, we're here, we're a charity, here's what we do, and come to us if you want to help. And we'll try. Obviously, we won't just sort of sit back and passively wait. We'll go in there. We'll organize soup kitchens. We'll organize, donations of items and clothes. And in doing so, the people that do want to talk to us will come and talk to us. Now, it's multifactorial. Sometimes, for a cultural reason, women won't approach me, especially if they're mostly from Islamic societies, Afghan, Sudanese, Iranian. They sometimes have difficulty. That's why I'm actually the only male on the committee and also on the board of trustees of my local refugee charity, the one that operates locally in London. I'm the only male. Now, I'm not sure why that is, but it'd be nice to. But actually, it's good we have so many females because they can then contact and help the females a lot better than I can for cultural reasons. Although it's not exclusively. So and on the other side, men, as we've talked about before, often are quite bad at asking for help, and especially psychological help. Especially if they say, "Listen, I'm scared, I'm alone," and they're not good at opening up, even to a doctor, even to a therapist, let alone to me, who they don't know. They know I'm some kind of charity worker, but they're a bit hesitant. So there's a lot of factors there, and we're not professionals. We're just sort of community volunteers. We try and work with professionals. So for those reasons, whoever comes to us and says, "I need help," happy to help them. But they need to do that because we can't live their life for them. They need to take ownership because we're not. That's also part of the consent, and that's the only way that it can be done because they need to take charge of, okay, I really want this. I want my asylum process to work. I'm going to do voluntary work. I'm going to do this. If they want to do that, we'll help them. If they just want to come to us and say, "Sorry, can I have a new phone? Can I have, a laptop to apply for a job? Can I do this? Can I do that?" Just simple one-off things. We'll also do that as well. So we're trying to be basically good neighbors and good friends. We are a charity and community organization, but we need to do that just because we need to do things properly and follow the regulations and protect our befrienders and volunteers because they also have trauma from talking to these people as well.
Cool.
So we have the
May,
official organization, but we don't triage in that way.
sure. May God
Yeah, it's
bless your
whoever comes to
efforts.
us.
May God bless your
Thank you.
efforts. And so people might be, how is he, how am I asking, AJ these questions and saying, may God bless your efforts? First of all, in the Quran, it says that you should not be suspicious because suspicion can, I can't remember the word. Do you know the verse? It was like, can lead to lying or something. But anyway, like basically, yeah, you have to be careful of being suspicious of people. The point is like, oh, this could be a thing, but I don't know, and I'm going to assume that it's not a thing, right? That it's not just you're not kind of chasing women, right? Anyway, so let's go to the last bit, which is nothing to do with the subject, but how are you doing? But I'm going to twist it a little bit as well, because one of the things I'm trying to get men to understand, because we're not very good at this, is how to connect with people. And so I'm going to ask you how you're doing for 5 minutes. Then I'm going to force you to ask me how I'm doing. And I'm going to kind of yeah, so I'm going to get people to watch. There's actual technique to kindness. You have to, kindness doesn't come easily. You have to make an effort. So I'm going to be demonstrating a technique in the next 5 minutes, and then I'll get you to kind of, we'll reverse the roles. So anyway, how are you doing, Alavari? How's your week been?
Yeah, been very good. This is kind of the height of summer coming, so that always helps. Meeting people outside, meeting friends. Not had much time for martial arts recently. Again, the refugee work and asylum seeker support has kind of shoved that out of my schedule. Hopefully,
Cool.
not for too much longer temporarily. But I still have my daily yoga and exercise sort of at home, but I'm missing the martial arts community. But unfortunately, that has to take a backseat sometimes as an indulgence on myself, whereas where I need to travel and meet other people and again give that in-person help to some of these asylum seekers who are in a very bad position.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been looking very positive. I'm traveling to Asia next month, so looking forward to that, both on
Wow, that
Humanist
sounds epic.
International. Yeah, the
So
Humanist
Singapore.
International Global. Yeah, exactly. It's a
Oh,
global conference for humanists, and yeah, I sort of have to attend that
wow.
as a
You're doing a
director
lot of
with a
cool.
politician. Mm.
That's really awesome that you're doing so many cool things, so many opportunities to do
Yeah, hopefully we'll see some family
meaningful
that I've
things.
not seen in a long time. So looking forward to that as well. As
Ah,
well as also the
oh,
charity work,
you got
family
family. Do you say you
support.
got family? Do you say in Singapore?
Yeah, in
Oh,
most, yeah, quite a few Asian countries, but certainly Singapore.
oh yeah, because I thought you were
Mm.
Indian, so you'd only have family in India, but that's wrong. Because I got family. I'm
There's,
Pakistani, got family
yeah.
everywhere. But yeah, yeah. So a lot of the Indians moved to Singapore. Is that right? Or just like it's
A
business, isn't
fair
it? I
amount.
suppose.
It's just for work.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very difficult to move there and settle down because of the way they have their visa, I think, and
yeah.
requirements. And yeah, but at least for a temporary, working period, yeah, many of them do go there.
Cool. Have you been to Singapore before?
Hmm. Yeah, several times. But not for a long time. I'm trying to cut down my flying, or I had been, but apart from unavoidable things like this, where I have to go for institutional reasons, for office
Yeah.
work or for charity work. Yeah, I've last maybe it's been 7 years. Yeah, since I've been. So
Oh,
looking
it's
forward to
seven
that.
years since you last went to
To Singapore.
Singapore. Cool. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Tell me one thing you like, top of your head. What do you enjoy about Singapore when you go there?
Mm, the people. The people are really nice. They're very positive. They're very engaged, especially the youth. Their interfaith is fantastic. The equivalent meetings here in London, and actually not with humanists, say with Baha'is, who are very active in a religious community. Here we'd maybe have 20 youth. There they'd have 40, 50. And it's just the energy there is different, which I like. It's a zest for life,
Cool.
which I hope I'll
So
reconnect with when I go back there.
that's the humanist convention, is it?
I'm going for a humanist convention, annual conference, but while I'm there, I'll be doing other interfaith stuff like visiting Baha'i friends, visiting some Sufi friends there
Oh,
in the
I get
interfaith community, because Singapore places a high premium on harmony, religious harmony, interreligious harmony, because they also see that as economically beneficial. So the government
it.
actually supports that. So yeah, we've been invited to a few kind of interfaith, cross-cultural, cross-religious meetings there. As well as also, I've got Baha'i friends from when I went there the last time. So yeah, looking forward to revisiting them.
Cool. So, people are watching, if they were actually watching this bit, um, I think there's a technique to being interested in other people. So first of all, you have to mentally be interested in the other person. You have to love the other person. So I love Alavari, and that might sound weird for British people, but where I am, we always say Habibi. Everybody says they love each other all the time, right? It's very normal and it's very human and it's very necessary, I would say, right? Because we treat each other as brothers and sisters, not strangers, and all that kind of stuff. Everybody, not necessarily directly blood related. Okay, we're all in Arab culture known as Bani Adam, children of Adam, basically all from the same root. Anyway, so you have to come from a place of love, then you will be interested in what the other person is saying, and you will feel the potential joy the other person is feeling. Like, oh, I feel like, oh, is he going to Singapore? I love traveling myself, so I'm excited about that. And I try to empathize in that sense, and then ask questions about it, and ask questions of what people are saying. And by asking questions, you're demonstrating you're really listening. And even by asking the person to clarify, it shows you're interested, right? And over here in Jordan, we're really good at just sitting down, listening, and being fascinated by the other person. And that's, I think, something we don't really have so much in England or London. People get bored of what you're saying, and they want, like, if you ask them how you doing, they don't want to hear that you're not doing well. Be like, why are you telling me? Just say you're fine, right? So we really need to change that in London and England, especially London, especially. I would say the big cities have a suffer from that. So anyway, so that's kind of like what I was up to just then. It doesn't mean I don't feel things for other people. You have to. It's Islamic idea to do things like say peace be upon you, which start like where as a Muslim you have to every person that goes past you, you have to try to say peace be upon you, which is kind of I can't remember what the word is, but it's kind of like when you repeat something, you start feeling it. Is there a word? What's that word? Like when you repeat something,
Mantra, manifestation.
mantra, manifestation, sort of thing. Yeah, that kind of thing. Anyway, so Alavari, do it back to me.
How are you doing, Khaled? How are you feeling? Feeling peaceful, I hope.
I'm okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm always doing like difficult things. So I personally find streaming quite difficult. It doesn't come to my. I like to be more agreeable if I could, but yes, I'm enjoying life. I'm very lucky to have loads of friends. Um, I'm separated from my family in some ways because I'm working in a what's it called? I have a work office. Like I have to be away from my family for 6 days of the week. That's not great. But I'm incredibly lucky because the weather and the friendly people all around, and the pros are that I'm in the city, so I'm closer to lots of other people as well, which I wasn't when I was in the village. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Happy to hear that.
Is this a funny exercise? How do you feel about this exercise?
No, I think it's completely natural. And again, if we
Sure.
develop the environment for people to have these connections and to get in touch with their humanity, it will happen naturally. But if, for example, London's famous for people on the tube, public transport, not looking at each other, or even if you make eye contact with someone, they'll see that as like, okay, women will be afraid and men will be maybe annoyed. But if they're, stressed, overworked, we don't have leisure time, and you could even see the same people on a Monday morning and a Sunday or a Saturday in the same train carriage. If they sort of catch each other's eye, you'll see it's different there. So I think, yeah, when the population is under stress and they're not allowed to express their natural humanity, things like asking how are you will be very, very difficult. And yeah, that's
Yeah, we
something that
do
we
have
have
a
to
whole
change.
bunch. In London has a whole bunch of weird rules. I think the good thing about traveling is that what you think is a norm, let's say in London, is not a norm in many other places. And of course, that's
Mhm.
not saying the other places are better. We have a weird norm
Mm.
over here where you see coffee cups just lying in the middle of the road. It's like somebody had to drink, and they open up their door and they put it on the floor and just carried on. It's like that's really bad, you know. So I'm not trying to make it out that Jordan is perfect and stuff like that. They've got some really bad habits as well. Um, but they're also very loving and caring and sit around and spend time with each other, which is awesome. So I think the best approach is just when you travel, you're going to see lots of bad things, but you're also going to see lots of good things and maybe copy the good things because there's no point going around complaining and only copying the bad things and complaining about it. So yeah, I mean, how do you feel? I mean, that basically that idea is based on a verse of the Quran, which says, "We have created tribes and sub-tribes so that you may," and it's not always coming out, doesn't always come out in the translation, but so that you may learn the good things from each other, which is very few people see that in the translation. I had to actually dig to find that out. What do you think about that idea before we kind of wrap up? We should go around the world learning good stuff from different cultures.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with it. It's one of my favorite verses. And the Prophet Muhammad's example and his teaching tells us to seek knowledge even unto China, which at that time was basically a symbol for go halfway around the world if you need to, but don't prejudge the community or the source of the knowledge. Just seek knowledge and seek connection, seek that divine uh, within it. every person that you meet within all of creation. So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Awesome. Thank you so much, AJ. I know you're super busy. Appreciate these very thoughtful and no holding back conversations in both good ways and positive. I'm positive, like in loving, also as in, let's say, antagonistic ways, which are also a little bit important as well. All right. Thank you very much, AJ. Have a great day. Have a great week.
Happy
Catch you
to do
later.
it. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Peace be upon you too.